Now let's see one more practice problem related to input data validation. So this is the scenario we have. Let's say the user is trying to log into the application. So we want to prompt the user to enter the password. And once the user enters the password, we want to validate the password, which means we want to check if the password is correct or not. And if the password is not correct, we need to ask the user to re-enter the correct password. And we need to keep looping this until the correct password is provided. So this is the kind of scenario we find in most of the applications, right? So first let's see this simple variation and then we'll add more constraints to it. So let's say the actual correct password is python123. So here I'm directly specifying the value, but in real-time applications, the user details will be stored in a database and there could be some call which retrieves the password from the database. Now what do we want to do? We want to take the password input from the user and we need to validate it against this actual password. And we need to keep looping until the correct password is provided, right? So which means my breaking condition depends upon the user input. So in such scenarios, it will be much easier to use while true kind of a syntax. We discussed about when to use while true kind of a syntax and when to use while condition kind of a syntax in previous videos, right? Because here breaking condition depends upon the user input. So it is better if we use while true kind of a syntax. So this is an infinite loop, and what do we want to do inside the loop? First, we want to read the input from the user. So we can use input function with a prompt enter password. And now once the user enters this password, we need to validate it against the actual password. So we can use an if statement with a condition if password equals to actual password. And if the condition is true, we can simply print login successful and we need to break out of the loop. Because once we get the correct password, we are done, right? So we want to break out of the loop. And here for the sake of this example, I'm simply printing login successful. But in reality, there could be some function like, show home page, which shows the home page of the user if the user enters correct password, right? But for now, to keep it simple, we are simply printing login successful message and we are breaking out of the loop. So we want to break out of the loop if the password is correct, right? So if the password is not correct, what we want to do is we can simply print incorrect password message and we can continue in the loop. So again, in the next iteration, the program asks the user to enter the password. So this process will keep on happening until the user enters correct password. That's when this condition will be true and it will break out of the loop. And here, if you want, you can put this print statement in an else block as well. Like, let me show you. So we could have written it this way as well. So in the sense that if password is correct, we'll simply print login successful and we'll break out of the loop. Else, which means if it is false, we'll simply print incorrect password and then it will go to the next iteration, right? But even if you don't use this else block and write the logic in this way, even this works the same way, right? Because if this is true, only then it will get inside the if block and it will break out of the loop. If it is not correct, only then it will continue, right? And then it will print incorrect password. So this print statement is executed only if this condition is false, which is exactly what happens even if we put inside the else block. So you can simply write it this way. Always keep in mind that there could be n number of ways to implement one particular logic, all right? So this is our final logic. It's very simple, right? Now let me run the program and show you how this works. Right click, run re-enter password. So it asks to enter password. Let's say I simply enter test. So which is not correct, right? So this validation will fail. So it will simply print incorrect password. So let me press enter. So it prints incorrect password and it asks me to enter the password again. So now let me enter the correct password, python123. Now if I enter, so this condition will be true and so it prints login successful and it will break out of the loop. And this process would continue until the user enters correct password, right? So this program works perfectly fine as expected, but there is something wrong with this. What is it? What are we trying to do in this program? We're trying to repeatedly take the password input from the user until the user enters the correct password. But this can continue forever, right? So it can go on till 100 times, 1000 times, infinite times. But do you think that's how real applications work? No, right? In general, most of the applications will give you at max of 3 to 4 attempts, after which the account will be locked, isn't it? But in this problem, we are not limiting the number of attempts. So let's add more constraints to it. So we are extending the problem by adding a couple of more constraints. So we want to provide at max of 3 attempts to enter the password, and after 3 failed attempts, the account should be locked. Let's take the same code we wrote before and see what changes we need to make. So firstly, we need to keep track of number of attempts completed, isn't it? So we need to create a variable, let's say attempts, and let's assign initial value as 0, because till now no attempts are completed, right? So the initial value of attempts will be 0. Now let's see what happens. So actual password is python123 and initial value of attempts is 0, which means 0 attempts are completed so far. And then we have this infinite loop, right? A while loop. And what happens in the while loop? So let's see the first iteration. So we're trying to read the password and we're validating if the password is correct or not. If it is correct, we're breaking out of the loop. If it is not, we are printing incorrect password. So this means one attempt is over. One time user has entered the password and we validated if the password is correct or not. So what do we want to do? We need to keep track of number of attempts so far. So we need to increment attempts by 1 by using attempts equal to attempts plus 1. Or you can also use attempts plus equals to 1, which is same as attempts equal to attempts plus 1. All right. So attempts value will be 1 now, and it goes to the next iteration. And in the next iteration, again program reads the password from the user, and let's say the user enters incorrect password again. So this will be false and it will print incorrect password again. So one more attempt is completed. So attempts value will be incremented by 1, which means attempts will become 2 now, which indicates 2 attempts are over. So it goes to the next iteration again and reads the password. And even now, if the password is incorrect, it will simply print incorrect password and attempts will be incremented by 1, which means attempts will be 3. So 3 attempts are over now. Now it goes to the next iteration and we don't want to read the password again because we are done with 3 attempts, right? So we simply want to lock the account. So before reading the password, what do we want to do is we want to check if 3 attempts are completed, and if 3 attempts are completed, we want to simply print too many failed attempts, your account is locked, and we want to break out of the loop. So we need to add this if statement checking if 3 attempts are completed at the top, so that once 3 attempts are completed, it will break out of the loop without prompting the user to enter the password again, right? And here we're simply printing this message, too many failed attempts, your account is locked. But in reality, there could be some function like lock account, which will actually lock a particular user's account, right? But to keep it simple, we are simply printing this message. All right. Now what happens? Let's run the program and verify. But before that, let me comment out the previous code so that we can focus on this new logic. So let me run the program, right click, run re-enter password. So what happens here? So it will enter this while loop. Initial value of attempts is 0. So attempts equal to 3 will be false. So it will not get inside the if block. So it will continue and simply asks the user to enter the password, right? So let's enter test1 and press enter. Now what happens? This condition will be false. So it will continue. So it will simply print incorrect password and attempts value will now be 1, right? And it goes to the next iteration. And what happens in the next iteration? Again, it checks if attempts equals to 3, which is not correct because attempts value is 1 for now. So it will continue and asks the user to enter the password again. So let's say I enter test2 again. Now what happens? Again, the same thing happens. Attempts value will be 2, which means 2 attempts are completed. Again, this condition will be false. So it will continue and asks the user to enter the password again. Now let's say I enter test3, which is also not correct. Correct password is python123, right? So again, this will be incorrect. So if I press enter, what happens now? It will check if password equals to actual password, which is not correct. So it will simply print incorrect password and increments the value of attempts by 1. So attempts now will become 3 and it will continue in the next iteration. And in the next iteration, attempts equals to 3 will be correct. As you can see, we have completed 3 attempts, right? So this condition will be true. So it will simply print too many failed attempts, your account is locked, and it will break out of the loop. And that's exactly what happened here. Now let's execute the program again and let's try to give correct password now. So first I'll give incorrect password. Let me give test1 and press enter. So it prints incorrect password, and let me enter test2, which is also incorrect. So again, this condition will be false, right? So it will simply print incorrect password and it will increase attempts value by 1, which means attempts will become 2. So let me press enter. So it prints incorrect password. 2 attempts are over, which means attempts value will be 2. Now what happens again, it asks to enter the password, and let's say this time I'll give correct password, python123. Now what happens, this condition will be true. So it will print login successful and break out of the while loop. Let me press enter in the console. So as you can see, login successful and it exits the while loop, and as we don't have any more code, the process is finished. And as you can see, in this problem we have multiple exit points, right? One is when 3 attempts are completed and one is when the user enters the correct password. And also here this exit condition depends upon the user input. So in this kind of a scenario, using while true kind of a syntax will make more sense, as it will be much easier to write the code. And if we want, we can easily extend the program by adding more exit conditions as well. That's all for this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed solving this problem. I'll see you in the next one.